off mute. Great, and recording is happening. Okay, great. So, yeah, really excited to be here. Marla has very kindly introduced the two groups, and I'll just be speaking a little bit about equity for a Green New Deal. It says it's sort of what it is in the title, but basically, equity for Green New Deal is union members who are part of equity who around 2020, so during COVID, realized that there were various different environmental campaigns happening within the union. So there was a councillor called Paul Valentine who was on his own sort of trying to find out if they could do a green review of the union itself. So what are the buildings like where the headquarters of the union are like? Are they as efficient as possible? Down to the very nitty gritty of the magazines that get sent out to every single member, which is 48,000. Are they recyclable? So, you know, the sort of the big and the small of the union itself, he was doing that on his own. And then a friend of mine and myself had in 2016 started a pension divestment campaign to try and get the equity pension scheme. There's a lot of acronyms and a lot of sort of words here, but to try and get that main default into a fossil-free fund. And so we realized that there was a few of us milling about doing separate things, and we thought in 2020, why don't we create a group with the umbrella title of Equity for a Green New Deal? So it was very much in line with what was happening in America with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Labour Party at the time, talking about how do we put jobs and climate and the trade union movement and justice, put that all together into a sort of umbrella movement, and it's not divisive. It's not you can have the green cause but you then sacrifice jobs. It's really sort of trying to be as cohesive and worker focused as possible. So we were like, okay, well, as members of the trade union movement, this can be maybe our group where this is our aim. So that was in 2020, and we were quite bold and thought, okay, well, we must start a manifesto then. So this was our manifesto. This was what the group decided. So we built up group members by visiting local branches of the union. We've not gone to all of them, to our shame, but we've gone to as many as the capacity allowed. We've done articles in our magazine. We've done social media, all that sort of campaign building that I'm sure all of you know so much more about. But we started to build our group from there, and this is the manifesto that we came up with as a collective. So number one was to empower members throughout the UK to fight for green and accessible workplaces. All of these will be pretty self-explanatory, but that is obviously just to make theatres, sets, TV locations, anything that one of our members is in, circuses, any of these places where we have a member, how can they feel more empowered to fight for a more accessible workplace and a greener workplace? Number two was to work within the sort of structures of the union itself to ensure that they have sustainable practices. So one of these things was we've now passed a motion at council this year, 2023, to make sure that the investments at equity the union hold themselves are now not invested in fossil fuels. So various different, I guess, leverages within the union, but just to make the union as one of the vanguard unions of, like, we fight for climate change as a union internally as well as externally. Number three was to campaign for our pension fund and our institutions to cut ties and sponsorship deals within the fossil fuel industry. And so there's been so many groups already doing amazing stuff around this. So Culture Unstained, BP or Not BP, various other groups that some of our members have been part of separately, have just been, fighting for the fact that the RSC had BP sponsorship, ironically, to fund 16 to 25 tickets. National Theatre was sponsored by Shell. Royal Opera House was still sponsored by Shell, and then one of our members went to an event last year and called them out. And it's so ingrained and embedded in the art washing with the greenwashing within our art institutions. And so what we wanted to do was have that as a main focus for our members, to say you can't use these institutions that we work in to wash your reputation, even though it's a really difficult line because Arts Council funding is so scarce. And so we've been really navigating, how do we communicate about resources in a very resource scarce industry, but saying that there are red lines, and a red line should be the fossil fuel industry. So push for the Arts Council and publicly funded bodies across all the nations to make funding dependent on genuine sustainability. So again, this was something that we wanted to sort of narrow down a bit more, but this wasn't for, a small local theatre to make it really difficult for them to try become as sustainable as possible. This was really much in our thinking, was very much around really well-funded NPO organisations to lead on the charge of having, for instance, in theatres, the Theatre Green Book standards to an advanced standard, or in film sets, for the ones that have got loads of cash, to make sure that they're using that money and that resources to have a sustainability lead within their organisation. So we really want to focus on the industries and the institutions that have money to really step up and lead the way, and to sort of embed that more in how we apply for funding, as within the industry, but how it has to be predicated on making sure sustainability is incorporated, but not at the expense of one person who's already stretched with time and resources and everything, and then they're forced to also think about the carbon budget. It's like, it's not that, it's making sure that it's embedded in the funding to make sure that there is time given for people who can then focus also on sustainability. Engage with the unions to fight for well-paid green jobs. So I think that's what that one is. So I think I've sort of referenced this, but this was this has been one of the biggest campaigns, is that Royal Opera House was still sponsored by BP until 2023, and then the National Theatre, there was a really brilliant organisation, very sort of an organic organisation called Art Workers for Climate and Equity for a Green New Deal, worked with them and with other workers who worked as box office staff for the National Theatre, who worked as ticket holders in the South Bank Centre, and we created a group who would all on one day walk out of the theatres that they worked in to sort of alert to the crisis of the climate, in line with the Friday Future Day, where obviously lots of kids went out, obviously on strike as well. So we tried to combine utilising like that amazing energy that youth had, with also looking at our workplaces and calling them to be better, but crucially as a united work front. So not actors on this side and stage managers on this side and box office staff here, but as a collection of different unions representing all the workers within the buildings. And then, sorry, this is quite a long ramble. This was the pension campaign. So it's been now 8 years trying to find a solution, because as mostly precarious workers, we're not financially, we're what we're called financially vulnerable. So it's very hard to move big blocks of money when the pension providers, there's lots of nuances why they find it tricky. They found it very tricky for us to find a solution for fossil-free default fund, because we don't pay the same amount in every month like a lot of other charities do that have moved into a fossil-free default. We're much more irregular and haphazard. But we've built up this campaign and got and in 2021 we got some way of the way there, which was we moved the default into a much greener fund. So 120 million was moved automatically into this greener fund. Also, all the bureaucratic stages were met to get to this point. So we passed branch motions, we put it to the council decided, the officers within the union agreed to push it as a campaign. So it was all democratically decided, and then with that democratic mandate, the campaign group went to Aviva, who provide our pension, and said we would love to move this pot of money. So they've done that, and then hopefully this year that the rest of the money will go to a completely fossil-free fund, which would be then the first union to have a fossil-free default fund in the UK. And we would try and just try tout that as much as possible. It's not happened yet, so it's a little bit under wraps, but we're really hoping that this is the year that will happen. and that's not only is it fossil free, but it would be out of arms. It would be focusing much more on like how can you use the money that these massive pots of money when you put everybody's little pots together. How can you use that for good for the future around people, climate, and earth? So not only would it be fossil free, it would be also trying to invest in wind farms, in companies that prioritize human rights, etc., etc. And then one of our other campaigns has been around sustainability agreements within the theatre. So I'm sure a lot of you know that there's this Theatre Green Book, and as brilliant as it is in so many ways, and it's such a ubiquitous tool that lots of theatres use, it unfortunately wasn't as inclusive as we would have loved it be, with union and with also workers on the ground. And I think the reason was because they didn't want to take up more time of people who are self-employed for free. So understandably, that's why that those voices aren't there. But we then created, as a group, we read the Theatre Green Books, the 3 books, and wrote what we think should be maybe more bold and more radical within the Theatre Green Book, and also to have much more of a union focused approach in some of their policies. And based on that, we've launched the first theatre agreements to improve sustainability standards that have been agreed with various theatres. And part of our campaigning is to try and make that much more to build momentum around that. And then another section of the campaign of our group were incredible around the screen industry. So because obviously within our membership, we've got some people who are directors, some people who are dancers, some people who are actors, some people who are writers, and 2 in particular just kept seeing how wasteful the screen industry was. So they spearheaded this campaign around getting as many sort of big names and big decision makers in one space to talk about how Netflix, BBC, Sky can be pushing for much more robust sustainability standards within their work. So I think this is a very friendly Zoom screenshot of various brilliant people talking about how, as a collective, we can push forward. And one of the angles that the campaign included was to create a green rider. So as individuals, and particularly for self-employed people, it can often feel like you have no power in making any sort of substantive change. And one of the ways that one of our campaigners thought is actually to have a rider that if you have a bit of leverage, or even if you don't, even if you're just on set for a week, you could have a rider which states that you support making mini sacrifices, as it were, for the greater good of the project. So that would mean not flying, prioritizing getting trains, things like that, where it was sort of agreed upon. A group of producers met with Equity for a Green New Deal to say if there could be a handshake, basically, of producers saying we will do as much as we can our end to reduce the carbon budget up front and not rely on offsetting, as much as maybe the artists and the workers who are represented by Equity can do stuff their end, which would be taking trains and not demanding really carbon heavy luxuries. Unfortunately, this obviously relates to status and to value, which has been just so ingrained in culture. So it's sort of unpicking that a little bit, which has got its own nuances. But this was our member Fenty launching it and talking about it on TED. And we've had other people who launched the Green Rider campaign at Edinburgh TV Festival. So they were incredible at just getting as many people and high profile actors to sort of say, I pledge to use the Green Rider going forward in work. And Albert, there was a lot of obviously collaboration with Albert. And all these other people. And I promise I will finish very soon. The other elements of our group is that we are obviously union members, so we try and prioritize campaigns that protect union members. So for instance, the Protect the Right to Strike campaign, that's a massive thing that we think is crucial for change amongst better workers' rights, but also just to empower members to then have campaigns that about issues that they care about. And then this is us at a climate march, I think. And then other things that we just try do is one of our members Organising for Power, which is this amazing woman called Jane McAlevey in America, talks about how, does these trainings about how union members can better empower each other and work out where they can leverage change. So we did a 6-week training where whoever could make it on the Monday night would come, do the training and feed back to the rest of the group. And other members have gone on Julie's Bicycle, creative climate leadership campaigns, just to sort of, I guess, skill the group up as much as possible, and then to iterate that learning back into the group so that we're collaborating with others who are already doing some of this amazing stuff and doing it better, and so we can learn from them, but B, also so that we can feel like in these rooms where sometimes people are meeting decision makers, that there's enough skill and climate literacy or whatever it would be that we have to push our agenda forward. And then other things, I guess, are just fundraisers. One of our members was really brilliant at organising a fundraiser where we raised money for the branch in Scotland of oil workers, because there was a screening that we did internally just about, I guess, again, the divide that particularly this current government is doing of saying, these environmentalists or whatever just want to make sure that the fossil fuel industry dies and everybody who works there is jobless. And it's just the opposite of that. It's making sure that there is cross solidarity around these industries. So that was part of the fundraiser there. Yeah, and just we try sort of get together and be together as much as possible as well, just because I think when we're talking about systemic change, either that's within workers' rights or climate justice or yeah, any of these things, I think it's trying to find time where you create space to celebrate mini wins or learn from each other, or find like-minded people and not feel so lonely. So that's something that we have done. That's it, I promise. So this is our link tree, which is where all the things that I've referenced. So there's our website. It's how to, if you wanted to utilize a green rider, that's in that link tree. How to join the campaign, all of that's there. I can also put it into the main Zoom chat. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to that.